"You disappoint me every day," she said while folding clothes. Those words hit my heart like a hammer. It was just an ordinary Saturday afternoon. My mother was folding laundry in the living room like she always did, and I had just come home from work. I had no idea that what started as an innocent conversation about my Sunday plans would become the moment that changed our relationship forever. If you've ever felt like nothing you do is enough for someone who should support you, this story will touch your heart deeply. And if you're enjoying this content, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more real stories like this one. My name is Ashley, I'm 32 years old, and my entire life I tried to be the perfect daughter. I grew up in a middle-class family in Portland, Oregon, with hard-working parents who always had very high expectations. My father, Michael, was an accountant, and my mother, Linda, worked part-time at a department store. They met in college and built a stable life, but always with that constant pressure that things could be better. From a young age, I learned that love was conditional. When I got good grades, I received praise. When I did something wrong, I heard long lectures about how I was wasting my potential. My mother had this peculiar ability to make any achievement of mine seem insufficient. Graduated with honors from college? But why wasn't it summa cum laude like the neighbor's daughter? Got my first job as a graphic designer? It's just a starting job. I hope you don't get comfortable. The pattern started early. I remember being 7 years old, coming home excited because I'd gotten the lead role in our school play. I burst through the front door, my backpack still bouncing on my shoulders, practically vibrating with excitement. "Mom! Mom! Guess what happened?" She was in the kitchen, as always, preparing dinner with that methodical precision that characterized everything she did. She didn't even turn around when I ran in. "What is it, Ashley? And please don't slam the door like that." "I got the lead role in the school play. I'm going to be the princess," I announced, expecting her to drop everything and celebrate with me. She finally turned around, wiping her hands on a dish towel, and looked at me with that expression I would come to know so well, a mixture of mild interest and immediate concern. "That's nice, honey. But you know this means you'll need to memorize all those lines. I hope you're prepared to work hard. And we'll need to talk to your teacher about the costume. I'm not paying for some elaborate outfit." Even at 7, I felt my excitement deflate. I had expected hugs, maybe a phone call to my grandmother to share the news. Instead, I got a lecture about responsibility and a complaint about potential expenses. This became the pattern of my entire childhood. Every achievement came with a but. Every moment of pride was immediately followed by a reason to worry or do better. When I made honor roll, she worried I was becoming too focused on academics and not developing social skills. When I joined the soccer team to develop those social skills, she worried I wasn't focusing enough on academics. My father, Michael, was a different kind of problematic. He wasn't cruel like my mother could be, but he was completely passive. Whenever I tried to talk to him about how Mom's words hurt me, he would give me the same response. "You know how your mother is. She means well. She just wants you to succeed." I learned early that "she means well" was the family motto, the excuse that covered every cutting comment, every moment when I felt small and inadequate. "She means well" was supposed to make it okay that I never felt good enough. High school was particularly brutal. I was involved in everything: honor society, student government, varsity soccer, the school newspaper. I maintained a 3.8 GPA while working a part-time job at a local coffee shop to save money for college. Most parents would have been proud. Mine found reasons to worry. "You're spreading yourself too thin," my mother would say when I came home exhausted from soccer practice. "Colleges want depth, not breadth. You should focus on 1 or 2 things and excel at them." So I quit soccer to focus on academics and student government. Then she worried I wasn't getting enough exercise and that I was becoming too isolated. "You need balance, Ashley. All work and no play isn't healthy." I couldn't win. No matter what I chose, it was wrong. No matter how hard I worked, it wasn't enough, or it was too much, or it was the wrong kind of effort entirely. The college years provided some relief simply because of physical distance, but even then, her influence followed me. She called twice a week, and every conversation followed the same pattern. She'd ask about my grades, my social life, my plans for the future, and no matter what I told her, she'd find something to critique or worry about. When I called to tell her I'd been accepted into a prestigious internship program, her first response was, "I hope you know how competitive it will be. Don't get your hopes up too high." When I told her I was dating someone, she immediately launched into questions about his family background, his career prospects, whether he was serious about me. When I mentioned I was enjoying a particular literature class, she worried that I was being impractical and should focus on more marketable skills. By the time I graduated, I had learned to filter my own experiences through her lens before I even shared them. I would anticipate her criticisms and try to address them preemptively. "I got a promotion at the internship, but I know it's just a small step and I still have a lot to learn," I'd say, trying to beat her to the deflation. It was exhausting. I was constantly auditioning for my own mother's approval and never quite getting it. After college, I moved to Seattle for my first real job at a marketing firm. For the first time in my life, I was truly on my own, and it was intoxicating. I could make decisions without explaining them to anyone. I could be proud of my achievements without immediately bracing for criticism. I could eat cereal for dinner if I wanted to, or stay up late reading a novel without someone commenting on my choices. I flourished in that environment. My coworkers liked me. My boss appreciated my creativity and work ethic. I made friends, dated, explored the city. For 3 years, I felt like I was finally becoming the person I was meant to be. Then I met David. The first David, not the one I'm with now. He was charming, ambitious, confident in a way that I found magnetic. He worked in finance and had this way of making big plans that made me feel like I was part of something exciting and important. We moved in together after a year, and everything seemed perfect. He was the kind of man I thought my parents would approve of. Successful, well-educated, from a good family. When I brought him home for Christmas, my mother was more pleasant to me than she had been in years. She actually seemed proud to introduce him to the neighbors. "Finally," she said to me privately, "you're settling down with someone worthwhile." For once, I felt like I had done something right in her eyes. The relationship became not just about David and me, but about maintaining my mother's rare approval. When David started working late more often, I made excuses. When he became critical of my cooking, my friends, my career ambitions, I told myself he was just stressed. When he started controlling how I spent money, what I wore, where I went, I rationalized it as him caring about me. My friends started expressing concern, but I dismissed them. My mother liked David. My mother, who found fault with everything, approved of this relationship. That had to mean something, right? The relationship lasted 6 years, and looking back, I can see that I stayed in it far longer than I should have because I was terrified of disappointing my mother again. I was terrified of going back to being the daughter who made bad choices, who couldn't maintain a relationship, who was wasting her potential. When David finally left me for a coworker, someone younger, less complicated as he put it, I was devastated, not just because of the breakup, but because I knew what it meant. I would have to tell my parents that the one thing they had approved of in my adult life was over. I would have to watch my mother's face fall, hear her sigh, endure the subtle and not so subtle implications that I had somehow driven him away. The phone call home was as awful as I had anticipated. When I told them David and I had broken up, there was a long silence. Then my mother's voice, carefully controlled. "What happened, Ashley?" "It just didn't work out," I said, not wanting to get into the details of his infidelity and emotional manipulation. "Relationships don't just not work out," she said, and I could hear the disappointment creeping in. "You have to work at them. You have to compromise. You can't just walk away when things get difficult." The implication was clear. This was my fault. I hadn't tried hard enough. I hadn't been flexible enough. I had let a good man get away through my own inadequacies. "Mom, it's more complicated than that. Is it? Or are you just not willing to do the work that relationships require?" I hung up that night feeling worse than I had felt, even immediately after David left. He had destroyed my confidence in love and relationships, But my mother had destroyed my confidence in my own judgment and worth. That's when I made the decision to move back home temporarily. I told myself it was practical. I needed to save money, regroup, figure out my next steps. But the truth was, I was running back to the familiar hell of my childhood, because at least there I knew the rules. I knew how to navigate my mother's disappointment. It was painful, but predictable. The first few months back home weren't too bad. My parents were gentle with me, recognizing that I was grieving and vulnerable. My mother even showed flashes of the nurturing parent I had always wished she could be. She made my favorite foods, didn't comment when I stayed in bed late on weekends, gave me space to heal. But as time went on and I started to recover, her old patterns returned. The criticism, the constant suggestions for improvement, the sense that I was a project that needed fixing. Only now it was worse because I was 28 years old, and in her mind, I should have been beyond needing this level of management. "When are you going to start dating again?" she'd ask 6 months after I moved back. "You can't just hide away forever." When I started going out with friends again, she'd comment on how late I was coming home. "You're not in college anymore, Ashley. You're a grown woman living in your parents' house. You need to act accordingly." When I focused on my career and started taking on freelance projects in addition to my full-time job, she worried I was becoming too focused on work. When I took time to rest and recharge, she worried I was becoming too comfortable and losing my motivation. The freelance work was actually going really well. I was building a portfolio of clients and starting to make good additional income. I began to think seriously about starting my own consulting business. I was excited about the possibility in a way I hadn't been excited about anything since before David. But when I mentioned this to my parents over dinner one night, my mother's response was immediate and deflating. "Ashley, don't you think you should focus on getting your personal life settled first? Starting a business is incredibly risky, and you're already starting over in so many ways." My father nodded in agreement. "Your mother's right. Maybe focus on advancing at your current job first. Build up some savings. Get yourself established in a relationship. Then think about entrepreneurship." I felt that familiar sensation of my dreams being minimized and my judgment being questioned. Here I was, finally feeling passionate about something again, and their response was to list all the reasons I wasn't ready for it. But I had learned to doubt myself so thoroughly over the years that I started to wonder if they were right. Maybe I was being unrealistic. Maybe I was running away from the hard work of building a traditional life by chasing business fantasies. So I put the business idea on hold and focused on what they suggested. I tried online dating, which was a nightmare of awkward coffee meetings and men who seemed disappointed that I was living with my parents. I applied for higher-level positions at other companies, but my heart wasn't in it. I was going through the motions of the life they thought I should want instead of pursuing the life I actually wanted. The months turned into a year, then 2 years, then 3. I found myself trapped in a strange adolescent limbo, living in my childhood bedroom, but with adult responsibilities and income. I was contributing significantly to the household, paying what amounted to rent, buying groceries, handling repairs and maintenance, but I was still treated like a child who needed constant guidance and correction. My mother's daily commentary became the soundtrack of my life. "Ashley, you can't just heat up frozen dinners every night. You need to learn to cook proper meals. Ashley, why is there so much laundry in your room? You're not in college anymore. Ashley, what are your plans for the weekend? You can't just stay home watching Netflix forever." Every aspect of my life was open for inspection and critique. If I went out, she wanted to know where, with whom, and when I'd be back. If I stayed in, she worried I was becoming antisocial. If I spent money on things I enjoyed, a book, a nice dinner, a piece of clothing, she'd comment on my spending habits. If I saved money, she'd worry I was becoming too frugal and not investing in my future. The worst part was that I started to internalize her voice. I would catch myself looking at my own choices through her critical lens. I would second-guess decisions I felt good about because I could anticipate her disapproval. I would feel guilty for being happy because I knew she would find something wrong with whatever was making me happy. My social life suffered. I stopped inviting friends over because I was embarrassed by the dynamic with my mother. I could see how she treated my friends, polite but coolly appraising, always managing to work in little digs about my living situation or questions about their intentions. "It's so nice that you're still friends with Ashley despite everything," she said to my college friend Melissa once, as if my temporary living situation made me damaged goods. Dating became nearly impossible. How do you explain to a potential partner that you're a successful professional in your 30s who lives with parents who treat you like a wayward teenager? How do you bring someone home when you know your mother will interrogate them and then spend the next week analyzing everything they said and did? I tried moving the relationships along faster to get to the meeting the parents stage quickly and get it over with, but that just made everything feel rushed and artificial. I tried keeping my dating life completely separate from my family life, but that felt secretive and unsustainable. After a series of dating disasters, I decided to take a break from romance altogether and focus on my career. That's when the freelance opportunities really started picking up. I was working with bigger clients, taking on more complex projects, building a reputation in my field. The business idea I had shelved years earlier started looking more and more feasible. I began keeping detailed records of my income, expenses, and client feedback. I researched business licenses, insurance, and tax requirements. I started putting together a business plan and projecting potential income. For the first time in years, I felt like I had a clear vision for my future and the practical skills to make it happen. But I made the mistake of sharing my renewed enthusiasm with my parents again. "I think it's time," I announced over Sunday dinner, 4 years after moving back home. "I'm ready to start the consulting business. I've got enough clients to sustain me, enough savings to cover the startup costs, and a solid plan for growth." The silence that followed was deafening. My father set down his fork and looked at my mother. My mother set down her fork and looked at me. "Ashley," she said in that tone that meant she was about to deliver what she considered tough love, "don't you think you're being a bit unrealistic?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, you're living in your childhood bedroom at 32 years old. You haven't been able to maintain a relationship or even get your own apartment, and now you want to quit your stable job to start a business? Don't you think you should get your personal life sorted out first?" It was almost word for word what she had said 3 years earlier, as if my growth, experience, and changing circumstances meant nothing. As if I was still the broken woman who had moved back home after a devastating breakup, rather than someone who had rebuilt her confidence and skills. "I have gotten my life sorted out," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "I've been supporting myself and contributing to this household for 4 years. I've built up a client base and developed expertise in my field. I've saved money and done my research. This isn't a whim, it's a calculated business decision." My father joined in. "But Ashley, the statistics on small businesses are terrible. Most fail within the first 5 years. You'd be giving up benefits, job security, a steady paycheck. For what? The uncertain income of freelancing?" "I'm already freelancing successfully on top of my full-time job," I pointed out. "This would just be making it official and allowing me to take on more clients." "But what if it doesn't work out?" my mother pressed. "What if you can't find enough clients? What if the market changes? What if you get sick and can't work? You don't have a husband to fall back on. You don't have children who will take care of you when you're older. You need to think about security, not just following whatever dream pops into your head." Every word felt like a small knife. The message was clear. I was not competent to make major life decisions. I was not successful enough to take risks. I was not established enough in any area of my life to pursue my ambitions. I was, fundamentally, not enough. "I understand your concerns," I said, forcing myself to remain calm. "But I'm not asking for your permission. I'm sharing my decision with you." My mother's eyes hardened. "Well, I hope you don't expect us to support you when this fails." "I don't expect you to support me now," I replied. "I pay rent, I buy groceries, I handle repairs around this house." I'm not asking for financial support. I'm asking for emotional support. Emotional support doesn't pay the bills, she said flatly. Emotional support doesn't provide health insurance or retirement savings. You're being childish and impractical, and frankly, I'm tired of watching you make these kinds of decisions. That conversation happened on a Sunday in early March. I spent the rest of the week thinking about what she'd said, questioning my judgment, wondering if I was being foolish. By Friday, I had almost talked myself out of the business idea entirely. But then something happened that changed everything. I was at work, having a particularly good week. I had just completed a major project that had come in under budget and exceeded the client's expectations. My boss, Jennifer, called me into her office and told me that the client had specifically requested me for their next project, a 6-month campaign that would double my freelance income. I was so excited that I couldn't wait to share the news. I called my mother from the parking lot of my office building, practically vibrating with enthusiasm. "Mom, you'll never guess what happened. Remember the Johnson account I was telling you about? They were so happy with my work that they want me to handle their entire spring campaign. It's the biggest freelance contract I've ever been offered." There was a pause. "That's nice, dear," she said, in a tone that suggested it was anything but. "Nice? Mom, this is huge. This one contract would cover my expenses for months. It's exactly the kind of thing that proves the business idea could work." "Ashley," she said, and I could hear her settling in for what I now recognize was the conversation that would change everything. "We need to talk. Can you come home early today?" Something in her tone made my excitement evaporate, but I agreed. I left work an hour early and drove home with a growing sense of dread. When I arrived, my mother was in her usual spot. The living room, folding laundry with that mechanical precision that had become so familiar over the years. The sight of her there, surrounded by neat piles of clothes, suddenly seemed symbolic of everything that felt stagnant and controlled about my life. "So," I said, setting down my purse and approaching her with the remnants of my earlier excitement. "Did you want to hear more about the Johnson contract? I could really use some support on this. It feels like such a validation of everything I've been working toward." She didn't look up from the towel she was folding. "Ashley, we need to have a serious conversation." "About what?" "About your life. About your choices. About the fact that you're 32 years old and still living like a teenager." I felt my stomach drop. "What do you mean?" She finally stopped folding and looked at me directly. Her expression was cold, disappointed, and utterly final. "I mean exactly what I said last Sunday, and what I've been trying to tell you for months. You're living in a fantasy world. Because I want to start a business? Because you think that getting one freelance contract means you're ready to abandon financial security. Because you're more excited about some work project than you are about building a real life for yourself. Because you're still acting like success at work means anything when you can't even manage to get your own apartment or maintain a relationship." Each word hit me like a physical blow. "I contribute to this household. I work hard. I'm building something." "You're existing," she interrupted. "You wake up, go to work, come home, watch Netflix, and repeat. That's not building anything. That's just getting by. And honestly, Ashley, it's exhausting to watch. What exactly do you want from me?" She stood up from her chair and faced me fully. "I want you to grow up. I want you to stop living in this house like it's your permanent residence. I want you to find a real relationship with someone who can actually take care of you. I want you to stop chasing these unrealistic business dreams and focus on advancement at your actual job. I want you to start acting like the adult you're supposed to be instead of the perpetual adolescent you've become. And if I don't want those things, if I want something different for my life," her eyes hardened, "then you disappoint me. Because you disappoint me every day, Ashley. Every single day you make choices that show me you haven't learned anything from your mistakes. Every day you prove that you're not the daughter I thought I raised." The words hung in the air between us like a poison cloud. I stood there, feeling like I had been slapped, trying to process what she had just said. "You disappoint me every day. Every single day. Not just when I made mistakes, not just when I fell short of expectations, every day. Simply by existing as myself, by making choices based on my own values and dreams, by refusing to live the exact life she had envisioned for me. "What do you mean by that?" I asked, though part of me didn't want to know. She continued folding clothes as if we were discussing the weather. "I mean that you're 32 years old, living in your childhood bedroom, with no husband, no children, and no realistic plan for your future. You get excited about little work projects, but you're completely ignoring the important things. When I was your age, I had been married for 8 years and had you kids. I had built something meaningful with my life. I am building something meaningful. Are you?" She shook out a shirt with unnecessary force. "Because from where I sit, you're just surviving. You've made this house your permanent refuge instead of using it as a stepping stone. You've turned your job into your entire identity instead of seeing it as a means to build a real life. You've convinced yourself that being single and childless at 32 is somehow empowering, when really, it's just sad." I felt my hands start to shake. "Mom, I contribute to this household. I have a successful career. I'm financially independent. I'm working toward goals that matter to me. How is that disappointing?" "Because none of it matters if you're not building towards something bigger," she said, finally looking at me again. "Career success doesn't mean anything if you're alone. Financial independence doesn't matter if you're still living with your parents. Goals don't mean anything if they're just ways to avoid the real work of growing up." "The real work of growing up?" "Yes. Finding someone to share your life with, creating a family, building something that will outlast you, contributing to something bigger than your own little career ambitions." I stared at her, realizing that we weren't just talking about my life choices. We were talking about two completely different definitions of what a life well lived looked like. In her mind, I was failing because I wasn't reproducing her path. I wasn't validating her choices by making the same ones. "What if I don't want the same things you wanted?" I asked quietly. "Then you're being selfish and short-sighted," she replied without hesitation. "And you're disappointing everyone who invested in your potential." That word again. Disappointing. Something inside me shifted in that moment. Not broke, shifted, like a puzzle piece finally clicking into place after years of being forced into the wrong spot. I looked at my mother, really looked at her, and for the first time I saw her clearly. She wasn't the woman who had sacrificed everything for her children's success. She wasn't the caring parent who just wanted me to be happy. She was someone who had made specific choices about her life and needed me to make the same choices in order to validate hers. My independence threatened her. My different priorities challenged her worldview. My refusal to follow her exact path made her question whether her path had been the only right one. "You know what, Mom?" I said, and my voice was surprisingly steady. "I think you're right about one thing." She looked pleased, as if she was finally getting through to me. "You're right that I need to want more for myself." "Good. Finally. I need to want to live somewhere where I'm appreciated instead of tolerated. I need to want relationships with people who celebrate my successes instead of minimizing them. I need to want to surround myself with people who see my value instead of constantly pointing out my deficiencies." Her expression started to change as she realized where this was going. "And I need to want to stop trying to earn love from someone who has made it clear that I will disappoint her every single day just by being myself." I turned and walked toward my bedroom. That childhood bedroom she had just used as evidence of my failure. For the first time in 4 years, I was about to make it a former bedroom. I pulled my suitcases out from under the bed and started packing. Not frantically, not emotionally, but with the same methodical precision she used to fold laundry. Clothes, toiletries, important documents, books, my laptop, the few personal items that actually mattered to me. As I packed, I could hear her in the hallway. "Ashley, what are you doing? Don't be dramatic." But I wasn't being dramatic. I was being decisive. For the first time in my adult life, I was making a choice based entirely on what I needed, not on what would keep peace or meet someone else's expectations. She appeared in my doorway as I was filling my second suitcase. I could see the panic starting to set in as she realized I was serious. "Ashley, where are you going? You can't just leave." "Actually, Mom, I can," I said, without looking up from my packing. "I'm 32 years old. I make my own decisions, and I've decided that I don't want to live somewhere where I disappoint someone every single day just by existing." "This is ridiculous. You're overreacting to one conversation." I stopped packing and turned to face her. "One conversation? Mom, this has been every conversation for 4 years. Every time I share good news, you find something wrong with it. Every time I express excitement about something, you list reasons why I shouldn't be excited. Every time I make a choice for my life, you explain why it's the wrong choice. I was just trying to help you see reality." "No," I interrupted, and I was surprised by how strong my voice sounded. "You were trying to control me. There's a difference between helping someone see reality and making them feel like they're fundamentally inadequate." I zipped up my suitcase and started on the third one. She was still standing in the doorway, and I could see her cycling through different strategies: anger, guilt, rationalization. "After everything your father and I have done for you," she began. "Stop," I said firmly. "You're not going to guilt me into staying in a situation where I'm told every day that I'm a disappointment. You're not going to convince me that accepting constant criticism is the same as accepting love." My father appeared behind her, drawn by the sound of our voices. "What's going on here?" "Your daughter is having a tantrum," my mother said, but her voice lacked its usual confidence. "I'm not having a tantrum, Dad," I said, continuing to pack. "I'm having a revelation. Mom just told me that I disappoint her every single day. So I've decided she's right. It is time for me to want more for myself. And what I want is to live somewhere where my presence is welcomed, not just tolerated." My father looked confused and uncomfortable. "Ashley, I'm sure she didn't mean—" "She meant exactly what she said, Dad," I interrupted. "And I'm finally listening." As I packed, I found myself remembering moments from my childhood and adolescence that I had reframed over the years. The time I won the science fair, and she immediately started worrying about whether I was becoming too focused on academics. The time I got my first job, and she spent the entire dinner explaining all the ways it could interfere with my studies. The time I graduated from college, and she spent the celebration dinner talking about how competitive the job market was. I had always told myself she was just being cautious, just trying to prepare me for disappointment, just showing love in her own complicated way. But now I could see the pattern clearly. She had been training me to expect criticism, to doubt my own judgment, to seek external validation for every choice. And I had been such a good student. By the time I finished packing, I had filled 3 suitcases and 2 boxes with everything that was truly mine. Looking around the room that had been my refuge and my prison for 4 years, I felt something I hadn't experienced in a long time: relief. My mother had retreated to the living room, back to her laundry folding, but I could tell she was listening to every sound I made. My father lingered in the hallway, clearly wanting to say something, but not knowing what. As I carried my first load out to my car, I called my college friend Rachel. We had grown apart over the past few years, partly because I had isolated myself, and partly because my mother always found something critical to say about my friends. "Rachel, I know this is going to sound crazy, but do you still have that spare room? I need a place to stay while I look for an apartment." "Of course," she said immediately, and the warmth in her voice almost made me cry. "What happened? Are you okay?" "I'm better than okay," I realized as I said it. "I'm free." By the time I finished loading my car, both my parents were standing on the front porch. My father looked lost and worried. My mother looked angry and defiant, but there was something else in her expression, something that might have been fear. "You'll be back," she called out as I closed my trunk. "When you realize how hard it is out there on your own, you'll come back." I walked up to the porch and looked at both of them. For a moment, I felt a flicker of the little girl who had just wanted to make them proud. But then I remembered her words. "You disappoint me every day." "Maybe I will come back someday," I said. But if I do, it will be as a guest who is welcomed and respected, not as a child who needs constant correction. And it will only happen if you can learn to see me as a person worth celebrating, not a project that needs fixing. I got in my car and drove away. In my rearview mirror, I could see them still standing on the porch, my father looking lost, my mother looking like she couldn't quite believe what had just happened. The drive to Rachel's house felt surreal. I kept expecting to feel panic or regret or the desperate need to turn around and apologize. Instead, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years, excitement about my own future. Rachel met me at the door with a huge hug and immediately started helping me unload my car. "I can't believe you finally did it," she said, as we carried boxes up to her spare room. "I've been waiting for this day for years." "You have?" "Ashley, you've been miserable living there. Every time we talked, you sounded smaller and more defeated. I was starting to worry you were going to disappear completely." That night, sitting in Rachel's kitchen with a cup of tea, I told her everything. About the daily criticism, the constant sense of inadequacy, the way I had learned to filter my own experiences through my mother's disapproval before I even processed them myself. "You know what the crazy thing is?" I said. "I was so used to it that I thought it was normal. I thought that was just how families communicated. It wasn't until she said I disappointed her every day that I realized how toxic it had become." "What are you going to do now?" Rachel asked. "I'm going to start my business," I said, and saying it out loud felt like a revelation. "I'm going to find my own apartment. I'm going to start making decisions based on what I want instead of what will avoid criticism. I'm going to remember what it feels like to be proud of myself without immediately bracing for someone to tear me down." The weeks that followed were both challenging and liberating. Rachel was an incredible roommate, supportive without being intrusive, encouraging without being pushy. Living with her reminded me what healthy relationships looked like. When I shared good news, she celebrated with me. When I was struggling with something, she listened without immediately offering advice or judgment. I started therapy, something I had been considering for years but never actually pursued. My therapist, Dr. Morgan, helped me understand the dynamics I had grown up with and the ways they had shaped my adult relationships, not just with my parents, but with romantic partners, friends, and even colleagues. "You've been trained to expect criticism," she explained during one of our sessions. "So you unconsciously seek out relationships with people who will fulfill that expectation. It feels familiar, even when it's painful." That insight explained so much about my relationship with David, about my reluctance to pursue the business idea, about my tendency to date men who were emotionally unavailable or critical. Within a month of leaving my parents' house, I had found a beautiful one-bedroom apartment with huge windows and a small balcony where I could grow plants. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. I could paint the walls any color I wanted. I could eat cereal for dinner without anyone commenting on my nutrition. I could invite friends over without worrying about anyone's judgment of them or me. The business launch went better than I had dared to hope. The Johnson contract I had been so excited about became the foundation for my consulting practice. Within 3 months, word of mouth had brought me 4 additional clients. Within 6 months, I was earning more from my business than I had been making at my full-time job. More importantly, I was happy. I woke up each morning excited about my work instead of dreading the day ahead. I made decisions quickly and confidently, without the constant second-guessing that had paralyzed me for years. I started saying yes to social invitations, trying new hobbies, taking weekend trips to explore hiking trails I'd always wanted to visit. My mother called me exactly 3 days after I left. "When are you coming home?" she asked, as if the entire conversation that had prompted my departure had never happened. "I am home, Mom," I replied. "I'm in my own place now." "That's not what I meant, and you know it." "I know what you meant, but this is my home now. This is where I live." There was a long silence. I could practically hear her calculating, trying to figure out the right combination of words that would make me come back without her having to acknowledge what she had said or how it had affected me. "I think you're being very dramatic about all of this," she finally said. "Families have disagreements. That doesn't mean you just run away. I didn't run away, Mom. I made a conscious choice to remove myself from a situation where I was being told every day that I was a disappointment. I never said— You said exactly that, I interrupted gently but firmly. You said I disappoint you every day. Those were your exact words. And you know what? I believe you. I think I do disappoint you every day because I'm not living the life you think I should live. But that's not my problem to solve anymore. She hung up on me, but I was okay with that. For the first time in my life, someone else's anger at my choices didn't send me into a panic spiral. I didn't immediately start questioning my decision or looking for ways to fix the relationship. I just felt free. Living with Rachel reminded me what healthy relationships looked like. When I shared good news, she celebrated with me. When I was struggling with something, she listened without immediately offering advice or judgment. It was incredible to live with someone who celebrated my successes instead of minimizing them. I started therapy, something I had been considering for years but never actually pursued. My therapist, Dr. Morgan, helped me understand the dynamics I had grown up with and the ways they had shaped my adult relationships. You've been trained to expect criticism, she explained during one of our sessions. So you unconsciously seek out relationships with people who will fulfill that expectation. It feels familiar, even when it's painful. Within a month of leaving my parents' house, I had found a beautiful one-bedroom apartment with huge windows and a small balcony where I could grow plants. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. I could paint the walls any color I wanted. I could eat cereal for dinner without anyone commenting on my nutrition. By the way, I'm curious to know, from which city and country are you following this story? Write it in the comments. The business continued to thrive. Word of mouth brought me bigger clients, more complex projects, and opportunities I never could have imagined. Within a year, I was earning double what I had made at my corporate job. More importantly, I loved what I was doing. My father called several weeks after our initial conversation. "Your mother misses you," he said. "I miss her too, Dad," I said honestly. "But I don't miss being criticized every day. I don't miss feeling like a disappointment in my own home. She's been different since you left. Quieter. I think she's realizing some things." "That's good, Dad. But my decision to leave wasn't to teach her a lesson. It was to save myself." Around this time, something wonderful happened. I started dating again, but differently this time. Instead of looking for someone who would impress my parents, I focused on finding someone who genuinely enjoyed my company and respected my choices. That's how I met David. We met at a photography workshop I had signed up for on a whim. He was the instructor, and I was immediately drawn to his passion for his craft and his gentle way of encouraging students to see the world differently. What I loved about David from the beginning was that he was curious about my life without being judgmental about it. When I told him I had recently started my own business, he wanted to hear about my clients and my goals. He never once suggested that my choices were wrong or that I should be focusing on different priorities. 6 months into our relationship, I realized I hadn't once felt the need to ask him what he thought I should do about a decision I was making. I trusted my own judgment. When I wanted his perspective, I asked for it, but I didn't need his approval to feel confident in my choices. It was around this time that my mother started calling more frequently. The tone of the calls had shifted from demanding to pleading, from criticism to what seemed like attempts at connection. "How is the business going?" she would ask, and when I told her it was going well, she would say, "That's good, honey. I'm glad it's working out." These conversations were tentative and careful, like we were both learning a new language. She was trying to show interest without offering criticism, and I was trying to share my life without bracing for judgment. The real test came when I decided to tell her about David. "I've been seeing someone," I said during one of our weekly phone calls. There was a pause. "Oh? Tell me about him." I was surprised by the neutral tone. "His name is David. He's a photographer. We met at a workshop and we've been dating for about 4 months. That's wonderful, Ashley. Are you happy?" The question caught me off guard. Not, "Is he financially stable?" or What are his intentions? Just, are you happy? Yes, I said. I'm very happy. Then I'm happy for you. It was such a simple exchange, but it represented a seismic shift in our dynamic. For the first time in my adult life, my mother had received news about my personal life and responded with acceptance rather than analysis. 6 months later, my mother called me with something I had never heard from her before: an apology. I've been thinking about what you said when you left, she began. About feeling like you disappointed me every day. Mom, you don't have to. No, I do, she interrupted. I was trying to help you, but I think I was actually trying to control you. I was so afraid that you would make mistakes that I forgot to trust that you were capable of making good decisions for yourself. She paused. I think I was so invested in you living the life I thought you should have that I couldn't see the life you actually wanted. And I think I was threatened by the fact that you might choose differently than I did and still be happy. What do you mean? I mean that if you could be happy living a completely different kind of life than mine, it might mean that my choices weren't the only right ones. And that scared me more than I wanted to admit. I am proud of you, Ashley, she said finally. I'm proud of your business, your independence, your apartment, this relationship. I just forgot how to show pride without also showing worry. That conversation marked the beginning of a new phase in our relationship. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest in a way our relationship had never been before. 2 years after leaving my parents' house, I was invited to speak at a major industry conference about building a successful consulting practice. As I prepared for the presentation, I realized how much my life had changed. I was running a thriving business, living with someone who loved and respected me, and most importantly, I genuinely liked myself. The night before the conference, my mother called. I know you have your big presentation tomorrow, she said. I just wanted to call and tell you how proud I am of you. Thank you, Mom. That means a lot. I was thinking about that day when you packed your bags, she continued. I was wrong. You didn't disappoint me every day. I disappointed myself every day by not being able to see how amazing you were becoming. The presentation went beautifully. I spoke about the importance of trusting your own judgment and building a support system of people who believe in your vision. Afterward, several people approached me to say that my story had inspired them to pursue their own dreams. But the moment that meant the most came when I checked my phone and found a text from my mother. Watched the live stream of your presentation. You were brilliant. Love you so much. No criticism, no suggestions for improvement, just pride and love. David and I got engaged on a hiking trip at a viewpoint we had discovered together. The proposal was simple and perfect. When I called to tell my parents, my mother's response was everything I had once dreamed of. Ashley, I am so happy for you. You two are perfect together. The wedding planning became an opportunity for my mother and me to work together rather than against each other. She offered suggestions when I asked, and stayed quiet when I didn't. The wedding itself was exactly what David and I wanted: small, intimate, perfect. 5 years after that day when I packed my bags, I realized something profound. The people who are worth keeping in your life will support you even when your choices confuse them. The people who try to manipulate you with their disappointment are revealing that their love is conditional. That day, when my mother told me I disappointed her every day, was devastating, but it was also liberating. It forced me to confront the truth that I was living my life for someone who would never be satisfied with my choices. That realization freed me to start making decisions based on my own values and dreams. It freed me to pursue relationships with people who celebrated me rather than tolerated me. It freed me to discover that I actually like myself, not the version others wanted me to be, but the real me. Today, my mother visits regularly and has developed a wonderful relationship with David and me. She never offers unsolicited advice, never questions our choices. She simply enjoys our company and celebrates the life we've built. Sometimes people ask if I regret those years living with my parents or if I wish I had left sooner. The answer is no. Those years taught me invaluable lessons about boundaries, self-worth, and the difference between love and control. The day my mother told me I disappointed her every day was the day I finally heard her clearly. She was telling me that I would never be enough as long as I was trying to be myself instead of her vision of who I should be. And I was finally ready to stop trying. That decision changed everything. It opened up space for authentic relationships, meaningful work, and genuine self-respect. It allowed me to discover that I am enough, exactly as I am. If you're in a situation where someone is making you feel small just for being yourself, please know this. Their inability to appreciate you is not a reflection of your worth. Their disappointment is not your responsibility to manage. Their approval is not required for you to live a meaningful life. You are allowed to pack your bags. You are allowed to choose yourself. You are allowed to walk away from people who make you feel like you're not enough, even if those people are family. The woman I discovered when I stopped performing for approval was strong, creative, ambitious, and worthy of love exactly as she was. She didn't need anyone's permission to pursue her dreams or validation to trust her judgment. That Saturday afternoon when I started packing while my mother folded clothes, I wasn't just packing my belongings. I was packing up years of trying to be someone I wasn't. I was packing room for something bigger, room to discover who I really was when I wasn't performing for an audience that would never be satisfied. And what I discovered was beautiful. If this story touched your heart, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to this channel for more real stories of transformation and empowerment. Share your own experiences in the comments. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. Remember, you are enough exactly as you are, and you deserve relationships that celebrate that truth.